So The Bride, directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, a Bride of Frankenstein movie. On paper, this genuinely sounds fantastic. I remember when this was announced and I was skeptical but curious what this would be. You know, Maggie Gyllenhaal's a pretty talented filmmaker. She made The Lost Daughter, which was a solid, thoughtful movie. And now she's making a Frankenstein movie. I think this is her second movie. It's a big, weird, ambitious Frankenstein movie set in Chicago in the 30s with Christian Bale and Jessie Buckley and Penelope Cruz and Annette Bening. It's in IMAX, released by Warner Brothers. This is a big swing. I respect a big swing. I was excited for this movie. And then I watched it on Monday night, which I'm very glad about because I would have been upset if I paid for a weekend IMAX ticket. And I just sat there increasingly frustrated watching something that has all the pieces of a great movie and then just does nothing with them. This is the worst kind of disappointment. Not a bad movie you can laugh at. It's a frustrating movie you just sit through. In The Bride, Jessie Buckley plays Ida, a woman who's living in 1936 Chicago, who gets murdered by henchmen working for a crime boss named Lupino. She also plays Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein, who narrates the movie From Beyond the Grave, possessing Ida's body to tell the story she never got to tell before she died. And that framing device immediately throws you because you think, okay, are we in the world of the novel? Are we in some meta-fictional space? What is the register here? The first 10 minutes of the movie I was already just kind of frustrated because it was extremely vague and weird. And I don't mind weird, but it just wasn't hooking me. And then we cut to the actual story. Frank, that's what they call Frankenstein's monster here, just Frank, played by Christian Bale, who's apparently been wandering around for 100 years. And he shows up at the laboratory of Dr. Cornelia Euphronius, played by Annette Bening, asking her to create a companion for him because he's lonely. And Annette Bening is fine in this. You know, she's doing the role she's been tasked with. It's just such a weird kind of throwaway role, especially for a mad scientist. I don't feel like they give her anything really to do. I mean, she's just kind of here, and that's it. So they reanimate Ida's corpse. She wakes up with no memory, and Frank tells her she's his bride and that she lost her memory in an accident, which she just accepts. So already we're doing a lot. We have Mary Shelley as a narrator. We have a monster who's been in Chicago for a century. We have a mad scientist who's actually a woman this time. We have a crime boss. We have a detective, Peter Sarsgaard, as Jake Wiles, and his assistant, Myrna Malloy, played by Penelope Cruz. And then Jake Gyllenhaal shows up as Ronnie Reed, a Hollywood movie star who Frank is obsessed with, which sends Frank and the bride on this cross-country crime spree where they're watching all these Ronnie Reed films, looking at his filming locations, killing people along the way while Cruz and Sarsgaard chase them. This is an interesting concept, a Frankenstein monster just loose in Depression-era America, going to the movies, falling in love with a film star. There's a great movie somewhere in that premise. This is not that movie, though. Like I said, the first 10 minutes were a very massive red flag. It's all very vague, very languorous narration from Jessie Buckley as Mary Shelley, and it's doing that thing where it's trying to establish atmosphere and weight before it's earned either. You don't know these characters yet. You have no investment, and the film is already asking you to feel something. And I just keep thinking about how we literally just got a Frankenstein movie, the Guillermo del Toro one on Netflix. And look, that movie was not perfect. It was kind of long. It didn't have any big Hollywood moments. It was very gothic, slow in its own way, looked like a Netflix movie, but it had a soul. It had a complete story. I really did enjoy that movie. It was genuinely about Victor Frankenstein and his creature, and it was a beautiful, distinct piece of filmmaking that was not only very true to the original novel, but created something new for, a movie that we have not seen in any Frankenstein adaptation, and it was very beautiful to look at. And then recently there was also Nosferatu, Robert Eggers' remake. I had some issues with that too. The plague subplot, for me, it dragged a bit. But it works because it has such creative reinvention. It's visually distinct. It has a huge cast, all taking bold swings. The characters are memorable. You're fascinated the whole time. And Nosferatu was a hit. The Bride wants to be in that conversation. It wants to be that kind of bold, auteur-driven genre reinvention. But it's just not. Here's what I think is the fundamental issue at the heart of the movie. It expects you to care about characters that audiences have no real attachment to. Think about it. General audiences have a vague idea of Frankenstein. If you're a cinephile, if you've seen a lot of horror, maybe you've watched a few of the classic Universal movies, but most people just know these figures as cultural shorthand. They're Halloween costumes. Nobody's walking into The Bride with a deep emotional investment in Frankenstein or, the bride of Frankenstein as a character. And Maggie Gyllenhaal's argument, and I think it's actually a valid argument, is that in the original Bride of Frankenstein from the 30s, the bride only appears in the last 2 minutes of the movie. For a film called Bride of Frankenstein, she barely exists. So the intent here is, let's actually give her a story. Let's center her. What does the bride have to say? That is a noble intent for a Hollywood feature. I respect that as a creative premise. But here's the thing, this movie contradicts itself on that premise constantly. Because for a film called The Bride, she is not the focus. Frank's obsession with Ronnie Reed drives most of the plot. The crime boss storyline involving Lupino takes up a huge amount of real estate. The Penelope Cruz detective arc becomes its own thing. And the bride, Ida, is just kind of dragged along through all of it. She gets lost in her own movie, again. And without a proper foundation, without us having any established version of these characters to hold on to, it's a remix of something we don't have enough feeling for to begin with. The Mary Shelley narration makes you feel like you're set in the world of the novel, but it's set in 1930s Chicago, so clearly you're not. And it's not really a direct sequel to anything. It's kind of its own original thing, except it's not original enough to stand out on its own. I keep coming back to Joker, and a lot of people are talking about Joker, with this movie. Lauren Sher is the cinematographer, Hildur Guðnadóttir, I hope I didn't butcher her name, who is a fantastic, musical artist. She did the score of this movie. The film is pretty at times. There are images in here that genuinely work, but it's the same problem as Joker, style over substance. And trust me, I did not like Joker. That movie is very frustrating. But at least with that movie, it has kind of a clear story being told. It was entertaining. There's more momentum. You knew what movie you were in. The Bride is more slower, more scattered, and somehow less coherent. And there is this very Joker-ish quality to the whole thing, the idea of a person being pushed and pushed by a cruel society until they snap and become a villain, except here it's a woman instead of a man, and it's Frankenstein's monster and his bride instead of a failed clown. And the problem was Joker was already doing a reheated version of Taxi Driver. It was already fundamentally broken, a remake of The King of Comedy. And now this is doing a reheated version of that. It's a copy of a copy. And with this whole messy swirl of characters, it just is fundamentally broken, like Joker. And the biggest issue with this is how this movie handles its women. And there are good female-directed movies about women. Some of the most interesting films recently, have been huge in conversation, like The Substance, Titan. I loved those movies. And those are genuinely weird and bold and do actually say something. And that's great. I love films like that. But this movie, in its attempt to foreground female experience and give these women voices, it ends up making all of them just victims. Every woman in this movie is just abused. That's their character. They're all just victims of various men doing various awful things to them. And none of them have actual interiority beyond that. They're not people, they're symbols of suffering. And that is the worst offense to me, because if your whole project is, let's give the bride her own story, let's center the women, and then all you do with these women is just subject them to cartoonish abuse and call it feminist filmmaking, it's failed as a movie like that. You've done the exact thing you said you were pushing against, just with more self-awareness about it. The attempt to make Myrna Malloy, too, Penelope Cruz's character, into this female detective rising through the ranks in an era where there are no female detectives, making her story a whole parallel arc of the movie, is just so on the nose. And again, I don't want to be misread here. You can make that movie well. It's just that doing it in this way, in this movie, is so obvious and so flat, and it distracts from the bride, whose name is literally in the title. And this segues into another issue. The movie is so overcrowded. There are so many characters. Frank, the bride, Dr. Euphronius, Lupino the crime boss, Clyde and James his henchmen, Detective Wiles, Myrna Malloy, Ronnie Reed. It is a lot of people to service in 126 minutes, and the movie never figures out how to balance them. The biggest casualty of this is Lupino. He's supposed to be the threat looming over the entire movie, the reason Ida was killed in the first place, the guy sending people after her. He's played by Zlatko Buric, and he's in like 3 scenes. And this is wild. He doesn't even get a proper send-off in the main film. He gets dispatched in the post-credit sequence, which, every time I watch a post-credit scene, I'm like, when did this scene get cut from the movie? It was probably in the film, but they couldn't find out a place to put it, so they just shove it into the post-credit scene. So the main villain of the movie is resolved in the post-credits. Like he's a mid-tier MCU antagonist. Maybe the argument is that the men are supposed to be in the background, that's the thematic point, but still you need presence. You need a threat that actually registers, or the stakes don't mean anything, and the stakes never really mean anything here. And look, I don't want to be completely unfair to this movie, even though I've been shitting on it, because there are things in here that do work. Christian Bale and Jesse Buckley are both really good. They're doing a lot with material that isn't giving them much back. Bale is committed as always, and strange in the way you want a performance like this to be. And Buckley is compelling whenever the movie actually focuses on her, which isn't enough. The idea of Frank taking the bride to the cinema, being obsessed with Ronnie Reed, going on this road trip through movie set locations, there is something romantic and melancholy and interesting in that concept. Frank's loneliness after 100 years waiting for a companion, wanting to share the things he loves, there is a real emotion available there. And Lawrence Sher's cinematography does have moments. There are some images that do land, but it's all in service of what? That's the question that kept nagging on me, and it's the same thing with Joker. Pretty images and good performances and interesting ideas that just float past into each other without connecting into anything that actually lands emotionally or intellectually. It means nothing. So The Bride is bizarre, it's overcrowded, it's very frustrating. It's a movie that's so much less than the sum of its parts. It has a great concept. Gothic horror, creature loose in Depression-era America, obsessed with the movies, searching for connection, and it wastes it. It has good actors, and it wastes them. It has something to say about women, and it says it in the most cartoonish, on-the-nose way imaginable. There are really good movies coming out right now, really good weird movies that take big swings and land them. This movie takes a swing, a genuinely bold, weird swing for a major Warner Brothers release, and it just completely whiffs. And for a movie in IMAX at $85 million that made $13 million in its opening stretch, there's something almost fitting about that. It's a movie that announces itself as important and then barely registers. I saw it on a Monday night, and I'm glad I didn't see it on the weekend, but honestly, it might have been more fun with a crowd, because at least then I wouldn't have been alone with my disappointment. The Bride, not recommended.